Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creating in Color. My name is Nicole M. Young Martin, and many of you may recognize my face, hopefully, from Black Writers Read. This web series, Creating in Color, is another opportunity for me to converse with others. I started Creating in Color sometime last summer, and what Creating in Color is, it's an opportunity for us to talk with BIPOC writers, musicians, visual artists, content creators, entrepreneurs, educators, and activists who take on to challenge conventions, redefine culture, and evoke social transformation. I don't do this show often. I do this series when some big thing emerges. And today I am hosting Tides for Reproductive Freedom, who recently became a nonprofit and they've been around for some time. And I wanted to bring them on to chat, especially given that many of them I consider family. On today's episode, I'm beyond excited to chat with the founders of Tides for Reproductive Freedom. Tides is the first abortion fund in Massachusetts, founded and led by queer, Black, and Indigenous people. They are dedicated to providing practical and financial support across race, gender, sexuality, spirituality, ethnicity, ability, and history seeking access to abortions. Tides is dedicated to building a comprehensive and accessible system in Massachusetts in coalition with the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund, the Jane Fund, which is based in Central Massachusetts, and the Abortion Rights Fund of Western Massachusetts, coming together to make abortion access in the state of Massachusetts smooth and responsive to the needs of all people seeking care in the state. Tides for Reproductive Freedom aims to organize with communities, clinics, funds, and values aligned organizations to ensure that no person is turned away from accessing abortion services. So, thank you all for joining us. And I want to start off today's conversation, of course, with introductions for all of you, because we're privileged to have the founders of the fund with us today. So, the very first question that I have is, can you all introduce yourselves, provide your name, pronouns, and your role with the organization?
Sure. So my name is Kara. I use she, her pronouns, and I am one of the co-founders. Hi, I'm Kamika, she, they pronouns, and I am also a co-founder.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Fela. I use she, they pronouns, and I am also a co-founder of Tides. We have somebody who's off camera today as well, who's another co-founder. And we just want to remind folks that, this movement can have all different kinds of risks and burnout. And so we're making space for folks if they don't want to be on camera. They don't have to be on camera, but one of our co-founders is with us today, and you'll be hearing her beautiful voice coming from over here.
Hi, I'm Lou Angie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a co-founder as well.
Cool. Yay. So the first question that I have for you all is, what is Tides for Reproductive Freedom's origin story, and how did you get started?
It's a good story. It's like a pretty it's good. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna try to not give us like the very long story.
The very long
story. We'll start.
Yeah.
You want to start with where you were at? You want to start where I was at? What you want to do?
I'm not sure how. I can start.
Okay.
So I, Kamika, I was formerly a volunteer with the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund, based mostly out of Boston, Eastern Massachusetts. I was a volunteer there. We were doing some work to try and incorporate racial justice a little bit more. And I just wasn't feeling the support. And I connected with Fela at
one of the NNAF convenings.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
I think it
was it the Northeastern?
Yeah, the first Northeast convening hosted by NNAF, the National Network of Abortion Funds. And we vibed over that of being different funds.
Yeah. Struggling with trying to incorporate the values that we felt needed to be represented within our abortion funds. Yeah. And at the same time, I was working with Kara at the Western Mass Abortion Fund. We were both volunteering for them. and I was working with Luanji at a different location. So Luanji was very aware of the work that I was doing in abortion funding. And it was exactly like Kamika said. We were just sort of, feeling like we needed something more that represented our communities. And so when Kamika was saying, I think we need this, and I was saying, I think we need this, we said, all right, let's all come together. And Luanji was like, well, I want to also do that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. That sounds good to me. We were just, just wanting to reach our communities, wanting to reach Indigenous people, Black people, other folks of color, non-English speakers, houseless folks, like folks who are, recovering from substance abuse or currently using substance, there's a larger community, queer community, it's a larger community that's not, wasn't being reached.
Yeah.
This was back in,
sorry, no.
This is back in 2018, just to give
Nice.
Yeah, in 2018, it was, I think everyone knew that back then that Roe was going to get overturned.
Yep.
Particularly with all of the states passing more restrictive work. And so understanding that we would need to be more active and proactive in reaching our communities and making sure that they that we were providing, we are a fund. So we have all these funds to help folks get this service. So we need to make sure that they know that we're there. And so not having or not being supported within our individual funds and trying to do that. We all decided to come together and create a fund to center that kind of work.
Exactly.
Nice. So what brought each of you to this type of work? Because for people who are watching who don't know, at least from where I sit, and then I work with the Women's Fund of Western Massachusetts, and we hosted a similar convening a couple of weeks ago. Many of these organizations are volunteer-based. So you're giving a lot to do this type of work. So what brought each of you to this type of work, and what was your calling, and why at this particular point in your lives?
I don't mind going first.
You want to go first? Yeah.
Yeah. So I had an abortion in 2003, and I lived and grew up in Springfield, and I accessed services in Springfield at Planned Parenthood. And I always felt that I was very lucky to have some friends who could pitch in with the cost. And going forward, I was volunteering for Planned Parenthood and some other traditionally white-led organizations. And when I began working with abortion funds in Western Mass, I just felt like there were the resources, but not always the representation for the communities that they wanted to reach, and people wanted to be involved. So when Fela and Kamika and Lou and I came together, I wanted to make sure that we were centering the voices of folks who needed it the most, and to make sure that when Roe did fall, we would be in a position to help folks get the care that they needed, regardless of where they were from in the country.
Nice.
I specifically to abortion fund work, I started 2013, right out of college. In college, I was active in a pro-choice group, but we focused mostly on sexual health, right? So not necessarily focusing on abortion. And I strongly support an individual's choice to get an abortion. I strongly support bodily autonomy, and those are two of my, or that is bodily autonomy is one of my strongest values, especially growing up in the South, where patriarchy is is the thing. And so being a young person and being taught these lessons of oh, men do this, women do this, you can't do this because you're a woman, and being well, fuck that. I'm gonna do what you know what I mean? And so being then a strong in centering that in everything that I do, and just in my life period. And so wanting to continue the work that I had started with the pro-choice group on campus, I got introduced to the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund, started doing work there, and connected through that work, connected with the National Network of Abortion Funds. Did some of that programming and connected with other folks like Fela, and I would say like when I started, it was very white. Like I went to Northeastern, so very white. So being the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund is also at the time was also very white. And so then like being in a space where I see other folks of color, other women of color, other trans women like doing this work, and also being like, yeah, like the way they're doing it, it doesn't feel right to you because it's not right, right?
Yeah.
And so finding that voice and connecting with Fela was like super fundamental to my development. Yeah.
Same. Just to say, like, you know, like, yeah, I pretty much have always really been interested in how do we talk about like sex in a way that is advantageous to everyone. And part of the way that we talk about sex and sex education, abortion has to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
It's never made a whole lot of sense to me as a person who grew up as like a high risk teen. Part of my narrative was like not even knowing that if I needed an abortion ever, that there were people who could help me. That like, you know, so like, you know, like how Kara was saying that like if you had friends and family who could help you, awesome. But the idea of like an abortion fund blew my mind. And I found myself unemployed in my like mid-20s. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, I'm doing this volunteer thing. Do you want to check out, you know, help with this abortion fund?" And I was like, "What even is that?" And when I learned about it, I was like, everyone needs to know about this. And as I about this work I was doing, nobody knew about it. Like my community, my people, nobody knew about it. And I, you know, a lot of folks in my life were folks that we weren't reaching. Low income people, people of color, people whose English isn't their first language, people who are, like I said, struggling with substance abuse and recovery, people who have even had abortions in the past, like no knowledge of this. And so I got really like, oh man, we got to do something about that, y'all. Like nobody knows that they could have help with this. And you know, that I became very passionate about it because it's almost, it was like this aha moment where I was like, yeah, we should be like making sure that everyone can access abortion. And this is a key piece of it. You know, this is a key piece, knowing that like the price goes way up after, you know, 12 weeks if you're seeking an abortion, like that you have to, you know, come up with more money, whatever. That's where my passion comes in. That's where my interest in it came from, specifically in abortion funding. That's my story.
I feel like similarly to you, I was like a whole adult when I met you, right?
Yeah.
I think it was 16, so I was like 25 or 26, and that was the first time I heard anything about like the landscape of like abortion funding, and like really like reproductive justice work and like where it was at and what people are doing and all of that. And I was like, wow, I'm like grown and like I don't know like anything about this, and it's important, and like, you know, and I care, and I know that like a lot of like my people in my community don't know about this and could have used this knowledge at some point in their lives, or could use the knowledge at some point. So then when Fela started talking about, you know, creating something new with like people of color at the center of, you know, that kind of like genesis of the new thing, I was really into the idea, you know, watching like your struggles and hearing about other people's struggles, and kind of white organizations. I was definitely not interested in taking part in that, but in something new, I was very much like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. And that's how I ended up here.
Nice. Very cool. And for full transparency for people who are watching, if you've followed me on social media, I hope you know where I stand on a lot of issues. Bodily autonomy for me is hugely important. Reproductive justice, especially for our communities, is extremely important. So this is another reason why when I found out, I was like, oh, y'all are now an official nonprofit that can take like donations, which I will be sharing links to their bonfire campaign and also how to donate directly to them towards the end. I was like, I have to have you on so that people are aware of the work and the capacity that you all have. So speaking of that, and I scratch my head as I say this. So this question pertains to doing this work in Western Massachusetts. And for those who may be watching from various parts of the country, Western Massachusetts is a very unique anomaly, full of, even though it's extremely small, it is very, very diverse in terms of income, in terms of rurality, suburbs, cities, ethnicities, but I would say across the line with all of the communities, there's a lot in terms of like access in terms of public transportation and income. Because one of the things that we talked about when I hosted the Women's Fund conversation was like, for example, where the Berkshires is located. Many people that are based in the Berkshires, in order to get an abortion, they have to travel to Springfield.
Mhm.
And I don't want to bust out a map for people. Y'all can Google it, but it's far. It's mad fucking far unnecessarily. So, and the other thing too, why I posed this question to all of you is, and this was kind of my thought. I'm originally from Detroit, and before I moved out here, I was like, oh, New England is the mecca for everything progressive and social justice informed. No, like there are so many issues, especially given in Western Mass, we also deal with not only a lot of racism, but we deal with a huge class divide. So this question, can you talk about the region and the communities that Tied to Reproductive Freedom serves and how it fits into the larger scope of the abortion access rights and reproductive justice movement?
I think the way for us to answer that is to answer how we're going about structuring the organization and how we do this work.
Nice.
So because many of us have had experiences with national organizing at this point in various levels, and we're doing national organizing with other abortion funds, we are really aware and sensitive of practicing mindfulness and putting together this organization. We've had enough conversations with other funds to say, like, we know kind of how we want to do things and how we don't want to do things. And one of the things that is important to us is reaching out to our communities at this point and asking, what is going to be useful for folks? Like, our communities that we're serving are going to be across Massachusetts, but also it's very important to us to reach folks who are traveling to Massachusetts, who were already traveling Massachusetts for access to abortion care. But we don't presume to know exactly what it is that folks need. So part of what our launching as an organization is going to be is doing that outreach and doing that work and hosting conversations and saying, what do y'all need? Like, we see that folks are coming here from Texas. What would make it easier for you, you know, the Lilith Fund or, you know, like Frontera Fund or any of these other funds that are like trying to get folks here. What would make it easier, you know, to make sure that folks are getting what they need? That's a very long-winded answer, but
No, that was a great answer, because that's also too something that I'm hoping they specify is that Tied to Reproductive Freedom is not just for people based in Western Massachusetts.
Yeah, we want to reach the entirety of the state, and we want to reach folks who are traveling into the state. And we even want to see how we can redistribute wealth from our state, which, you know, Massachusetts, no matter which way you cut it, is a very wealthy state.
Yes.
There's a lot of people interested in giving to reproductive justice movement in this state. How do we now take that wealth and redistribute it in a way that we're reaching our communities here, but also reaching our communities at large, right? Like we've said before, borders are imaginary. Our communities are everywhere. Like this is just a very real part of the conversation.
It is, yeah. And I think even a part of, I think we were having those conversations, this was like pro-Roe, and now this is after Roe falls, and we've already seen that clinics are not taking patients in certain states. States are immediately doing work to heavily restrict it, and so in states already are strapped with like don't have fund or clinics that are close by. Folks are already traveling hundreds of miles, and so like making sure that we are prioritizing that and those experiences in the work is like what the goal, and like helping to using that information to build out the services.
Nice.
And we're also just very focused on filling in the gaps that are involved in the abortion funding movement in the state, as well as the region and the country. Folks are really lucky in the state, at least if you know about it, you can get the money that you need for the procedure. But we want to know more than that. We want to know why folks, can't come on a certain day, or we want to be able to offer transportation. We know that childcare is a huge issue when looking at what folks need in order to access care. And so we really want to hear from the folks that are having abortion cares and their communities are, to figure out what it is directly that we can assist in, and do so with the community's lead.
Yeah, and I do hope, Fela, that this is still a dream of yours. There have been many conversations that Faye and I have had about, oh, can we create like a home for people after they've gotten an abortion? They can come and like rest and be taken care of, and we play music for them, and we cover them with a blanket and some food before they're sent home. Because that's, and I think that's something across the board in terms of reproductive care. It's that we're so focused on folks being the incubators of the unborn, to where we don't think about the needs of the people who are like that. That's my big thing. I'm like, did we forget that like they're humans? They're not incubators. They're not, so I hope that we can one day, I hope there's like somebody listening that's like, oh, I want to help you meet that goal. Here's tons of money to make that happen.
Please.
Yes,
That would
please,
be,
yeah. And just like, I think even beyond helping us reach that goal, just acknowledging and recognizing and having compassion to understand that folks that are when folks choose to seek the abortion that they want and need, they are doing that out of they understand what their status, like they know what's best for their lived experience and what's going to allow them to continue or to achieve a goal, or like just live the life that they want to live. And so like these decisions aren't being made in isolation. And so that's why the house, the dream, the house is like so important, because there are so many systems that are operating together to create the circumstances where a person is like having to sit seriously and make this decision, right? Like there's like all kinds of things that, so like just like hoping that the audience like have more compassion and like understand that like we're all having lived experiences that influence our choices, and we're not living in silos, and like it's not just this one thing that defines a person.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out, because that's the other thing too that I, talk to people about when it comes to these choices. And I'm only gonna insert my personal story in terms of like, specific birth control methods that I am on. And I'm like, it not only happens in a vacuum, it's a conversation with yourself, it's a conversation with partners, with your care providers, and also too really planning for your future. Because I know for myself, I'm like, it's a long thought process, and I don't want people to think, because I think what the narrative is, at least from how I'm hearing it, is abortions are like, what's the term? And this will probably be the first time this has even been framed this way, are like vending machines where like it's just an impulse. It's an impulse choice. And I'm like, it is not an impulse choice. Like there's so much that goes into decisions when it comes to seeking this type of care. And two, that's the other thing too, in terms of the use of language. This is a part, and this is why I love your t-shirts of Abortion is Healthcare, is it is a part of a larger healthcare plan. Again, it's not impulse, it's not I'm being selfish, it's a larger conversation that people are having before seeking out this type of care.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what are some of the barriers to access reproductive care that you see with many of our trans and queer BIPOC communities, talking not only just about Western Mass, but just across the country, like the communities that you see that will be seeking your support?
I mean, I feel like just on a basic level, like language inclusivity is just not there. Like a lot of the language used in any kind of like public forums, whether in person or virtually, tend to be like women focused, associating vulvas, vaginas, uteri with women, and just like altogether kind of leaving out anybody else who might need or want an abortion that does not identify as a woman. And like that kind of exclusion and like even stigmatizing is a barrier to care. Just
and harmful.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. How is it doing this type of work in this part of the country? People may suspect it due to culture and legislative support that it may not be as challenging as in other states. What is the landscape here, and how does it inform the ways in which your fund operates?
I think it's very individualized. I mean, this area has a lot of resources, but not necessarily the things that allow people to get to where they need to go, like public transportation. I feel like there may be areas in this state that just you don't have a ride, you can't get a lift, there is no bus, and you are pretty much stranded.
Right.
So a lot of what we look at is how we can provide the things that folks need, in addition to from our state, from other states as well.
We also have predatory, the crisis pregnancy centers.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes.
Yeah, there's a good amount of those. So even though there's like access, like abortion access deserts in like the Berkshires or in like Franklin County, there's still those crisis pregnancy centers. There's many of them. So, and there's one right off the highway in Springfield as you're driving, and they look very, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, they're not real clinics. They're not medically based. The people there are not doctors or nurse practitioners or anything. They will not give you accurate information about abortions, but they will claim to give you information about abortions that's inaccurate, not scientifically based. And they specifically focus on low-income communities, folks of color. They sure do have information in English and in Spanish. So they are like preying on multiple communities that aren't being reached necessarily by
boards and long signs.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
all over the place. Their advertising's amazing, and they like, I know like at some places like they've noticed that they like buy up Google AdWords and like they just like, are the first thing that will come up when you're trying to find information about abortions.
Yeah, we search for abortions in Springfield. It's the first thing that comes up.
Yeah.
So the Clearview Clinic.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this is people think this is a very, like you had said, progressive space, and but it's not, and people are again slipping through the cracks when it comes to access and reproductive justice, and it's really like folks who would like really probably like the information that we have if it was just reaching folks.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have more that you wanted?
I think I was doing that thing where I just like finish your sentence.
No, you're good. No, I appreciate it. Thank you for finishing my sentence because
sorry. Access is not just like it's not a thing, and the crisis pregnancy centers are everywhere. They're advertising everywhere, so you would think that they are like there to help you.
Yeah, because one of the things that I heard, which I think there's legislation happening in the state right now that is, I'm gonna butcher it, that's challenging the existence of the crisis pregnancy centers. And one of the things that I hate about what they're doing, besides the fact that they exist, is the lying. Like they will say to a pregnant person, you're either further along or something like that when they're not. And I'm just like, you're not medical professionals, and if you were, you're doing harm to the industry. And also remember the oath that you took when you came into practice. So like my whole thing is I'm like, integrity is so important, especially when it comes to seeking care. And I'm like, just the fact that I've heard many of those places lie about the state of a person's being, I'm like, yeah, no, this is not how it's going to function. And my husband just walked behind me. Can you talk about, speaking of that, can you talk about current legislation? And this could be regional, state, or federally, and how it is affecting the work of the fund.
Yeah, so we have a couple things going on in the Massachusetts legislation that will affect our work. The Crisis Pregnancy Center definitely is one of those things, because the way that they're operated are typically under the guise of charities.
Oh,
Like if
that's
you go
okay.
to, yeah, you go to a website and it'll have like options are important. And at the very bottom in the right hand corner, it'll say, will not provide referrals or provide abortions. And a lot of times, what these folks will do on their websites is state inaccurate or deceptive studies that have been done
Yeah.
that have no medical background or scientific knowledge. So I know some of our representatives are working on, getting some more things in place that would prevent folks from being able to open more crisis pregnancy centers, and in some cases, banning deceptive advertisements. We also in Massachusetts have a bill that is trying to expand abortion access for the medication abortion so that folks on college campuses around the state would be able to access abortion, medication abortion on campus. And as Massachusetts sees more patients from the rest of the country, the clinics are filling up quicker. And with that being an option for college students who often don't have transportation to get to, from UMass to Springfield, about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
40 minutes drive. But that would be something that is really helpful, and that we would like to make sure that we can get folks the information that they need in terms of being able to access abortion wherever they are in the state.
Let's see.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to be part of that pilot program, right? That was like really excellent for us. And I think that's going to really help the legislation come along for us.
Cool. And I just have a couple more questions for you all, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Us here. This is awesome, Nicole.
Yay!
Stay here all day.
I know. And I miss seeing you all in person. I'm like,
For real.
Oh, yes.
yes. So for people who haven't figured out, I'm practically siblings. So it's like, of course I have to have them on.
It's true. It's exactly right.
Exactly. Due to the current landscape in the country, which unlike we all know, it's like Apocalypse 25, how do you see the work of the abortion rights and reproductive justice movement shifting?
I hope towards the kind of work that we're doing. That it is, you're right. Like the landscape is horrible. Roe has fallen, but we've been a lot of groups, a lot of people have been kind of preparing, and mostly folks of color, Black folks, Indigenous folks, Latinx folks, like have been preparing for this for a long time, and also like haven't been able to access abortions already, right? Like Indian Health Services, due to the Hyde Amendment, can't fund abortions. So if you're a Native person and you want to receive an abortion, you can't access it through IHS Indian Health Services at all.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Due to Hyde Amendment blocking any federally funded abortions, even when Roe was in place, you couldn't go and access an abortion through Indian Health Services, which is where your health insurance, as if you're like an enrolled member, that's where your health insurance is going to serve you, right? So a lot of folks have been existing in how do I navigate and get to an abortion. So my hope is that a lot of funds will, follow the lead of the funds that we've looked at, like ARC Southeast, and all basically like all the Black-led funds that have come out through this process over the course of the years, who have always been doing, like Chicago Abortion Fund, all these groups have been doing and preparing for this work. We've looked to them and gone, well, how are y'all doing it? Okay, we should do that. Honestly, you would open by saying a lot of this work is volunteer. This work should be paid for folks. People who, if folks want to volunteer their time, that's awesome. But at this point, we need to be figuring out who are our communities, how can we support our communities to do this work and what kind of world we exist in. We exist in a capitalist system. So like it shouldn't be about, oh, you have a spare hour or two here, because this isn't going to take an hour or two. This is going to take a full-time job.
Yeah, and there's also a certain amount of emotional labor too that comes in this work, not only working with the folks who need to seek the care, but also, you know, possibly dealing with families who are and loved ones who are against them seeking this type of care and all of the other stuff, because that's the other thing too. And I bet a lot of the burnout probably comes from that, and also challenging institutions as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the movement, my hope is that I think like abortion funds are getting a lot of attention right now across the country. And I hope that in general, grassroots strategies become more used. I think we, like someone like I just recently heard this analysis where it's like, like we got Roe because we're relying on a legal strategy, and we're relying through like these laws that already aren't acknowledging that were written in a way that did not support, I don't know how to say it, like that didn't have Black and Indigenous bodies in mind, and did not have, they weren't centering how to protect these people, right? We have to make these constitutional arguments all the time and contort them to fit to us, to be like, this, we deserve the same protection. And so relying on that solely in this movement, I think has allowed for folks to, because the conservative side has been like plotting this for like 50 years.
Literally.
Right? Half of the people, majority of the folks on the Supreme Court were in the Federalist Society when they were in law school. So like they have been this is like a plan that has been in place for a very long time.
Very long time.
So like we have to take a all around approach, like the same, like to go back to like our strategy. So like using more of those like grassroots strategies and highlighting the like actual human impact of these policies and what it means into like just like a whole total shifting of like how we do this work. And I think that needs to happen in general in our society. So
Cool. And then given the leadership behind Tides Reproductive Freedom and your mission, why is it important for folks of color and queer and trans folk to work and lead in the reproductive justice and abortion access movement?
Because if we don't, like, white people are not going to think about us. Straight people, cis people are not going to think about us. We've already seen like people who are that close to like kind of the top tiers of privilege, they want to stay there. They don't want to shift like towards people who are marginalized across like more, intersections, I guess. So if we don't, like, no one is going to come help us. We have to help each other.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Like, and that goes like exactly what Mika was saying too. You know, Roe was put in place, but it wasn't put in place for like protecting all communities. It was for very specific communities. Like that was it.
And then the last question that I have for you all is, what can people do to support Tides for Reproductive Freedom? And then what can people do to join the movement and get involved on a local level?
I think locally, first of all, is like reach out to your local abortion fund. Because abortion funds are all over the place. And as like Nicole said in the beginning, like majority of us are volunteer ran, like from the leadership to the folks that are actually taken to like all of it is volunteer ran. There is like the shift to try and make it so we can pay folks to do this work. So just making sure that you help out at your local abortion fund, donate, give your time, and just like be nice to people, I think is like the best thing.
Truly, like truly key, actually.
And speaking of, I shared a link on how to donate to Tides for Reproductive Freedom. For people who don't know, I work in fundraising and philanthropy full time, so I have no problem asking for money. $1, $5, you have no idea how far that money will go. So there's a couple, I like that Tides does a couple of things for you to contribute. You can either donate through an Act Blue page, or you can buy a lovely t-shirt through
Yes.
Bonfire, which
Yes.
Kara is wearing one. Yes.
Says Tides for
It
you got
says
it
on the back. Yeah.
on the back of it.
Yes.
Abortion is healthcare.
Yeah.
You could get it as a tank. You can get it as a crop top.
Yeah, I
You
have
can get
this
it.
crop top. It's nice.
Yes.
It's cute.
In a wide variety of sizes as well.
Yes.
We've recently added a hoodie this time around.
Ooh.
So this is the second launch of our campaign. We just added a
Yes.
hoodie. So
Nice.
Yeah.
and you can always tack on a little donation to the donation that we'll get through you getting the t-shirt. A little note on Bonfire is that we don't get that full, I think the hoodie's like $37. I think we get like $7 from the $37. So folks know how that works.
Yeah.
For hosting the page, that's just, just so folks aren't like, why is it $37? That's so much.
Right.
It's not so much.
It's
It's a donation. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you for disclosing that, because that's one of the things that people don't understand about the fundraising world is that you have the amount, like you buy an item or something like that, and then you or donate, and then there's like a huge administrative fee attached to that. And a lot of times it goes towards paying the staff of Bonfire to make sure that they run the page and all of that. But I hope that y'all can get to a place where you're fundraising through your own channels and all of the proceeds go to you, whether if it goes directly into the abortion fund and also paying general operation costs. See, I dream big. So
we're here for it.
Yes.
Some of the opportunities that will come up with us for sure, because we do want to launch and we have been working on this idea of transportation, right? So like keep your ears to the ground. People do ask like, how can I help? That's going to be one of the volunteer directions that we'll be going in. And, there is like the dream that we could pay people like gas cards or like reimburse for mileage or something, because we do believe in people's time, not equating to the same as like how much money you have, right? And being able to help out shouldn't be restricted to that either, because everybody wants to help in some capacity, and not all help is just monetary. We know that.
Yes. And then also too, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just talking about abortion funds and letting people know that they are a
Yes.
thing, I think would be very helpful, just amongst friends, families, whichever families you talk to, to just say, hey, there are these organizations out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also just talking about abortion. It's like,
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
yes.
just talk about abortion. Just
Yeah.
be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also too about language too, because language does have power in terms of like specific words to use and
Not to use.
Mm-hmm.
yes. So thank you, Tides for Reproductive Freedom, for joining us this afternoon. And again, I shared the links, and when I repost the video, I'm going to share the links on how people can contribute directly to you. I wish you all the best and success, and also like dismantling also to the nonprofit industrial complex, which Faye and I have talked about numerous times. And I hope that your organization works towards that. I just got a comment that says, thank you for your work. Yes. So everyone have a great afternoon. And
you.
Yes.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mwah.
Yes. Mwah.